While my mom was waiting for a guy to leave the stage so she could interview him for Buddy magazine, this weird little guy came up to her and asked her to go on a date. She really said he was way too ugly. He couldn't like me because I was too good. I then asked her why she stopped him. It turned out to be Stevie Ray Vaughan. She said that the little guy got up and sang a few songs when the guy she was waiting for finally left the stage. She felt bad about how she treated him right away and tried to talk to him afterward. I wasn't good enough for you before I played, he told her. Now, I'm not story 2, this is a story my grandmother just told me. She met this guy in high school. Besides being pretty good looking, he was very smart and very funny. She liked him a lot, and she knew he liked her too. He finally asks her out one day, but she turns him down. My grandmother keeps telling me how well he turned out. He was rich and had a great time. I then asked her, why did you turn him down? She said, I couldn't date a ginger. Oh, those old folks. Third story. I was in my first year of college. I looked at a guy across the quad who seemed random. He came over and sat down next to me. We talked for a short time. I was going to go to his room, but my friends came in and grabbed me. It turned out that we shared an apartment. I went to his room, and we laughed around and talked as if we'd known each other our whole lives. And the engineering student kept telling me, the average biology student, how smart I was. It seemed like there was always something between us every time we saw each other. But I was in a relationship that was far away at the time, so I didn't go through with it. The only guy who knew how to make me feel good and make me smile was the one I turned down. Story 4, there was a guy in college that I found weird and annoying, so when he asked me to go on a date, I said no. He came back the next year looking even hotter. It turned out that he had worked out all summer. I felt bad about my choice until I asked him over one night, and he stole my PS3 and Yoda backpack. Thank goodness I was able to get Yoda's backpack back because he was living with a friend of mine. The next day he wore the bag so everyone knew it was mine. What came after was the worst part. I told him I thought he was weird and sent him on his way after inviting him to hang out. The next day he told everyone that we had something special, and he even used the bag as proof. I became known as the girl who was too friendly. He bought my PS3 and even went on a date with my roommate. It was a rough week. Story 5. I once turned down a really nice guy who was exactly my type because I wasn't feeling up to dating at the time. When I told my best friend about this in passing, it turned out that they already knew each other. My best friend got me to come out of my shell long enough for us to grab a quick meal together. After 2 years, I walked down the aisle toward him. We're now living together in another country, which has been a dream of mine for a long time. Our lives will be full of love and excitement. It's clear that I wouldn't have known this to feel bad about saying no, but it's crazy to think about how different my life would be now that I did. 6th story. This guy made me stare the whole time I was at the Queen Mary event. I thought he was the most beautiful thing in the world. This was picked up by my event planner, who then brought him over last night while they were having a ball. We strolled across the deck. When I told him I had slipped and almost fallen, he threw me into a dip and said this. He tried to teach me how to dance and was very good at it. He also told me that he liked taking trips, going to school, and all the same things I did, loved that night more than any other in my life. He kissed me on the stairs and told me, this is the last chance I'm going to have to do this. I had to go back to my group. What do you want me to do? I told him to keep walking because I was in an on-again, off-again relationship with someone who wasn't caring about me at the time. I feel terrible that I let someone so great go for someone who didn't care about me. I think about him all the time. That night is the one thing I would change about my life if I could. 7th story. I think of 2 guys. I liked Grant, he was so nice. But he was moving too fast. He said I love you too soon, among other things. He gave up trying to get together with me after I told him to slow down, because it was making me feel bad. After a few years we got back together, but it wasn't anything serious. His new girlfriend is beautiful, but they live far away from each other. From the outside I can tell that he's a sweet and loyal boyfriend. I feel like I missed out sometimes. Gary was someone I really liked, but he talked about and with other people all the time. I didn't believe he really liked me. He asked me to go on a date with him one day, but it was all meant to be funny, because I didn't want to look too eager and open. I said, no, that's not funny. I learned later that he was being serious, but he tried to act like it wasn't a big deal. It took place in high school. By the time I found out, he was seeing other girls and was dating this girl. They were together for the first time. It broke his heart when they broke up. After that, we got together at some point. As soon as he saw me, he was over her, so it was doomed from the start. I believe that if I had said yes the first time he asked, I would have been his first love and he would have loved me that much. Story 8. The 2 of us worked together for a while. We had a great time at work, surfing at the beach, and doing things with shared friends. I didn't know I was really feeling something for him until it happened slowly. Of course, I kept all of this to myself. I didn't want to make things awkward between us at work because he seemed way out of my league. He asked me to go shoe shopping with him one time. We bought some shoes at the mall, and then he asked me if I was hungry for lunch. Not right now, I told them. I need to work out before work. See you later. He asked me to go to lunch with him as a possible date, but I didn't understand that until much later. We still worked together and hung out as friends though, and both of us dated other people. He quit his job to travel and finish school, but he still stopped by to hang out. We went out one night. He stood in front of me, put his hands on my knees, looked into my eyes, and said, "Tina, I love you." I was sitting on a raised box. This is something I've never been able to say before. I love you. I love you a lot. I said okay and went back inside. I didn't know what to say. There were hints that he liked me, but we never said it out loud. At the time I had a boyfriend and wasn't going to cheat on him. So here I am. Say hello to Harry if you read this. I love you too. Story 9. In high school I had a great friend who was, well, just plain nice. We were very close. He would tell me all about his relationships with different girls, some of whom I knew and some who were not as old. Even after all of these talks I began to like him. He had a bad image, but he was actually very nice and loved all of his friends. He was the kind of person who would help anyone. A lot of the time, he was the man of the house and a great dad to his younger brothers. He told me in junior year that he was beginning to like me. During the new year he asked me to go with him to a friend's party. But I was a naive and trusting girl, so I didn't think much of it. And it hurt me that he would try to use me. I believed I was more to him than just another girl to hang out with. I didn't tell him how I felt about him. I broke up with him instead. Little by little, I started to pull away from him for no reason. He would try to talk to me, but I would do everything I could to stay away from him. I went to college far away, while he stayed in our towns. I thought about what I did for too long before realizing it was childish. We've been talking again lately, and I'm sorry about what happened. He told me he was sure I'd change my mind, but I'm glad to hear that he still cares about me. He has no idea that I'm leaving tonight for Christmas at home. I'm going to surprise him. I'm going to ask him to go with me to the party our friend throws every year for New Year's. Story 10. We were really close, but he never asked me to go on a date. There was no doubt that we liked each other. Except when my friends and I were playing a game where you had to pick the friend you'd want to date the most. When it was my turn, I joked. Another guy he was, of course, shocked, and it wasn't until a few days later that I understood what I had done wrong. I didn't talk to him for a long time because I was mad at myself. He has a girlfriend now and I feel so bad about it. We talk a little bit. I know that this was one of the worst things I've ever done. You're right that some people think I'm rude and don't know much about things. But on the other hand, I want to tell him, but I'm afraid it will lead to false rumors. Girl sense. Narrative 11. When I talk for a girl, I'm a guy, but this story always breaks my heart. I asked the girl to go on a date while she was working as a pizza worker. She agreed to go on dates with me, and for the next 6 months or so, I picked her up nicely, took her to lunch or dinner, and tried my best not to push her away from me. I was stuck in the friend zone and couldn't get out of it. It was free for me to see the SF Giants at Candlestick Park thanks to my boss, so I asked her to go with me. While neither of us really liked baseball, it looked like a fun thing to do. It wasn't. We had no idea what was going on. It was freezing, and she agreed when I said we should leave. I drove her home and held her hand the first time we held hands as I walked her to the door. She pulled her hand away. The words are very clear in my mind. It moves too quickly. Okay. Got the message. I let things go because she had moved away from me. I stopped calling her, and she didn't try to get in touch with me. Thank you, Deborah. Another few years went by, and I met someone else and got engaged. Deb called me on the phone. She wished they could meet. I told her I was seeing someone seriously, so maybe it wasn't a good idea. We talked for a while and then said our goodbyes. About a week later, she sent me a card telling me how sorry she was for pushing me away and how she saw me as the one that got away. Something funny about it is that I loved her so much. I still think about her. I'm lucky to have such a great wife, but I always wonder what might have been. Story 12. Even though this is my wife's story, it's about me. We met in high school and fell in love. Soon after we started dating, Larry Fitzgerald asked her to go to a school dance. She told him she already had a boyfriend and turned him down. She was shocked when I told her I thought she blew it when she told me about it that night. Larry was already a huge sports fan at that point. It was clear this guy was going to do great things even when he was in the 10th or 11th grade. As time went on and my wife and I started a family, Larry's business also grew and he continued to do very well. When I was with my girlfriend, I would sometimes say that Larry had just reached another important point by doing well at Pitt, getting awards, etc. When the draft came around and he was again seen as a top 3 pick, I told her she was wrong. And she would always say, But I was with you, or he was weird anyway. I told her she blew it when he was picked third by the cards again. She just shrugged it off. After a few weeks, I went into the kitchen and saw her reading the sports page. When I ask her what she was reading, she just hands me the paper and walks away. I think the title said something like Fitzgerald agrees to the $60 million deal. Story 13. I was in my second year of college and had a lover. He was a nice guy, but he had no goals. He was with his friends over the weekend, and I was bored, so I walked across campus to the student union building. The weather was bitterly cold and windy, and it felt like a scene from a romantic comedy. When I dropped a stack of papers, they began to blow around. And the guy who played football and had been flirting with me in one of my classes comes running up. He asked me if I was up for getting coffee because my hands were so cold. I said yes, why not? We chose Coco instead, where we sat for almost 2 hours. He was an honor student, and he only played football to get the money he needed for school. That guy was so freaking hot, funny, and smart. I was shocked when he talked to me. He told me he saw all of my shows. He finally asked if he could see me again, really see me. I really wanted to say yes, but I couldn't cheat on my boyfriend either. He told me to let him know if I changed my mind after I said no. I stayed with my boyfriend for a few more months, and by that time, football dude had a woman. A few years ago, I looked him up on Google. He is now a doctor and the head of the Special Olympics Committee in his neighborhood. He still seems like a great person. I'll always wish I could say yes to him. Narrative 14. Yes, when we were 16 years old, my best friend asked me to be his girlfriend. We were better off as friends, I told him, because I didn't want to hurt our relationship if something went wrong. I really wanted to say yes, but I didn't think he should have to deal with my issues. At that point, I wasn't in a good mental state. Even now, after more than 10 years, I still wonder what would have happened if I had said yes. He gave his blessing to my child, and is still one of my best friends. He's been married and divorced. When I saw his ex-wife, who I never liked, she told me that they split up because she couldn't stand the fact that he was still seeing his best friend. My boyfriend and I live together right now because we're together. I think this friendship will last, but sometimes I wonder what would have happened if I had given my best friend a chance to be more than just my friend. This is story 15. After high school, I worked at the customer service desk at a family-owned grocery shop in my hometown during the summers. Before I went to college, this was the last year I did it. This Hispanic guy about my age would come in to cash his paycheck all the time. He didn't seem to speak any English, and I only knew a few words of Spanish. But man, was he hot. Every time he came in, I'd get really tense. And he came in almost every week, even when my schedule changed. It looked like he tried to come in when I was working. We would both smile and stare at each other, sometimes without making eye contact, while I cashed his check. Over time, he would come in just to buy a candy bar or something, and he'd go to my desk instead of the others. We met every week, even though neither of us spoke Spanish or English, so I didn't think it would go anywhere. I loved seeing him and would melt every time he came in. Then, one day he came up to my desk and asked me if I wanted to go out. After work in the cutest, most fake English I could ever learn, I was so stupidly upset. I was so shy and weird around other people. Because I was so insecure that I told myself that this teen romance fairy tale would never, ever become more than a dream, even though we didn't speak the same language. It's been about 13 years, and I still feel bad about being so ignorant. When he asked, I stumbled and said something about not being able to date customers, which, by the way, was not true at all. My dad checked out at the same store where he met my mom. The cute Hispanic guy looked crushed, and I felt crushed inside because I was so awkward around other people. The thing he was trying to buy didn't even happen to him. I left the Snickers bar on the desk and walked away. When my shift was over, I went home and cried. I told my dad about it. He also worked at the shop. And I remember that he laughed at me in a kind way. It must have looked like I was really upset. He told me to be brave and try to talk to him again the next time he came in. Tell him I was wrong about the rules about dating coworkers. I never saw him again, though. After that, I went to college. I worked at the store again between classes, but I never saw him again. I remember this person. I still feel bad that I let him get away. Story 16. We were in the very beginning stages of being happy together as I had a boyfriend. One day, I was waiting at a bus stop to go to work when a guy crossed the street to ask me to go on a date. I said, "Oh." Something like, "Sorry, I have a boyfriend." My boyfriend quickly let me know that he wasn't the right person for me after that day. Back then, I worked as a cleaner. And at Christmas, people often gave housekeepers alcohol. I was putting together a nice collection. Place around 12 bottles on top of the fridge. All of them were drunk by my boyfriend in a week. I broke up with him because I didn't like how drunk he was. Always wished I had said yes to the guy at the bus stop. He seemed like a nice and interesting person. I met my husband years later, though, and now I'm not interested in anyone else. Story 17. When I was 11, the first guy I really liked asked me to go on a date. I told him he could find someone better because I liked him so much. I felt bad about what I did and tried to take it back, but I missed my chance. The experience could have been useful, but it taught me that being shy and unsure of myself doesn't pay off. I had never been very famous, but I chose to accept that about myself. That made me feel weird for about 2 years, but then I figured out who I was. I liked guys and asked them to go on dates, but they said no, plenty. But I didn't give up, and I'm pretty sure that every guy I asked out either said yes at the time or later asked me to go on a date. Over the years, I've changed from being a shy, awkward nerd who got picked on to a sure-of-herself woman who picks out the cutest guy at the bar, starts a conversation with him and his friends, and gets phone numbers while they talk about Beast Wars. That really did happen. If I hadn't turned down that first guy because I didn't like myself, I think I could have avoided a few years of pain, so I definitely feel bad about it. Though I don't think I would have become the person I am now if I had changed it, so I don't think I would risk it. Story 18. I liked this guy who lived down the hall from me in college last year. But I had a boyfriend that I cared deeply about, even though he wasn't very nice to me. Because my boyfriend had to go out with his friends instead of going on another date, the guy down the hall would make me tea and watch Doctor Who when I was mad. He would also sometimes make me poutine and bring it to my door. Even though he was really nice, I was sure I was in love with my boyfriend. After about a week, my boyfriend breaks up with me at a fast food taco place. Someone down the hall made me tea. After a few weeks, the guy down the hall asked me to go on a date, and I said yes. However, I felt awkward the whole time because I was still sure I loved my ex-boyfriend. I really wanted to go on a date with him because he was great, hot, and smart, but I knew I needed some time. He might have thought I didn't want to be with him if I told him all of that. That's what a friend of mine told me would happen. I chose to give him some space and hoped that he would still want to go out after some time had passed, after about 3 weeks. I went to his door to see if he wanted to have tea now that his wounds were better. I saw his friend answer and say, he's sleeping. He looked very awkward. I'll let him know I saw him. He went out with someone new. He's still with her after a year. I want to be happy for him, but I feel bad about everything I did. In the end, I got back together with my ex. I had a terrible time with him for 3 months, and then we broke up for good.